Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here on this very special day. Today is the realization of a dream for me. In this room and in the virtual meeting are people I've known all my life and people who I've never met before. And it means a lot to me that you showed up here to be part of this book launch and our discussion of the Rebalancing Act. Thank you especially to my friends who are helping me with this event today. And they all have one big thing in common. They've been dear friends of mine for decades. And it's been wonderful to share this journey with all of you. For those of you who I haven't met yet, I could probably turn the floor over to my mom or my sister or any of my friends, and they could tell you everything you ever wanted to know about me. But it could get embarrassing if you all start telling your stories. So I'm just going to share that I'm Carol Inneking. I've been a Houstonian for 50 years, so I'm pretty close to a naturalized Texan, I think. My career has spanned major corporations and entrepreneurial ventures as a business owner. I've collaborated with over 100 companies on 6 continents, including many in the energy industry. I'm honored to be launching this book as part of our inaugural Houston Energy and Climate Week. And we're here at the beautiful NOV Tower as they sponsor it. So David Reed, Allison, Brittany, thank you so much for all of your help and for your hospitality having us here today. So as we think about energy and climate, all of you who work in the energy industry are working hard to build more sustainable solutions for the world around us. But it's kind of an interesting metaphor, isn't it? Because we work so hard to bring energy to other people, but we also need to think about sustainable energy for ourselves. So how do we sustain personal energy so that we can show up every day the best way possible? I have no doubt you will gain some ideas today to help you on that journey. In just a few minutes, I'm going to be bringing up Allison, Bethany, Colleen, and Renee to discuss their experiences navigating work and all the other roles they play. Allison's going to lead a panel discussion, and then we'll open up the floor to all of you. And for those of you who are on the virtual meeting, Debbie Richards in the room here is monitoring your chat, and she's going to share your questions as well. So be sure and put your questions in the chat and your thoughts. After the session, I encourage you to stay around. If you're in the room today, we have some light bites for you. We have I learned it's called a step and repeat. I thought it was just called a photo backdrop, but learning these things. We have a step and repeat out back where you can take some photos with your friends, with the book. We have book signing, and we would just love for you to stay and enjoy the conversation. So with that, on with the show. So when I interviewed women for this book, the first question I asked was this: off the top of your head, name the roles you play or the hats you wear on a regular basis, besides female and worker. And they provided a lot of different answers. Let me show you here how many different answers they said. There were some really entertaining ones. So we heard the obvious ones, things like wife, friend, daughter, mother, sister. And then we got some really creative ones like holiday magic maker, chef, wardrobe specialist, vacation planner, driver, buyer, concierge, role model, life coach, caregiver, and the list goes on. And I bet you can relate to those examples, can't you? The opportunities to lead a full life are seemingly endless. But I'm going to ask you a few questions, and you don't need to answer them right now. But as we move through the discussion, I want you to think about these things that I'm asking you. How do you decide how you allocate your most precious commodity? Time. Do you focus on what's most urgent, who's asking, when the deadline is, what you can get done quickly, what you like to do, what you don't like to do, or some combination of those things? Or do you get to decide what you want to do, what brings you joy, or what matters most? Chances are, if you're like many of the women we surveyed, you probably don't have the luxury of doing what you want to do too often. Our adult lives as working women tend to stay filled with routines that make the days go by really quickly. let's see if I can try to get this right. Maybe this is just what my routine looked like for a long time, but see if you can relate. So we wake up, we get ready for the day, we maybe grab a quick workout if we're really motivated in the morning. We get others ready, we prepare breakfast, we get everyone dressed, we get everyone packed and off to wherever they need to go. Then we go where we need to go. Then you do what you normally do during the workday. So attend meetings, work on projects, eat lunch, and hopefully you're not eating lunch at your desk. Then you get into the afternoon round of meetings. You take needed breaks. You attend more meetings. You prepare and attend more meetings. Well, maybe that was just me. You reply to emails, texts, calls. You check things off your to-do list. And then the evening routine begins. You get everyone where they need to go next. Prepare dinner, prepare and attend evening activities, get everyone ready for bed, prepare for the next day, get yourself ready for bed, and fall into bed exhausted. And hopefully not too exhausted to interact with your partner for a few minutes. And then you repeat that for at least the next 4 days. Does that sound familiar? Life can be so filled with things to do that you don't even have time to think about bigger things like, what makes you truly happy? What fills you up? What drives you? What do you wish for? What do you hope for? What do you stand for? What do you love to do? What would you love to do someday? So how do you break that cycle? And why does it even matter? What if you work so hard for so long fulfilling all of these needs of others that you have no time left to fill your own cup? In our always-on world, it's easier than ever to get a lot of things done. After all, we have technology at our fingertips. It's supposed to make our lives easier, right? We have reels and videos to teach us how to do literally anything. We have hundreds of apps and shows streaming that can teach us how to have a perfect house, live like a celebrity, create viral dance moves, be demure, rent the runway, throw the perfect party, pose perfectly, and prevent wrinkles. We can binge watch shows for hours about true crime and crazy people and all kinds of other strange phenomena that are supposed to make us feel better about our own circumstances. And yet we're more stressed, exhausted, and burned out than ever before. Could this be a crisis of our own making? How do you spend your time? And why do you spend your time that way? And how does this match up with how you would like to spend your time? How many of your decisions are driven by the words, I should, I ought to, I'm expected to? Are you a prisoner to the expectations of others? If so, how might you reframe your perspective so you can let go of others' expectations or learn to say no? One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is the power to choose to say no, to let go of things that are of low or no value to you, and to choose what matters. Because you see, women have more choices than we've ever had before about how we spend our time. We can thank some amazing trailblazers a few generations back who paved the way for us to enjoy career success, flexibility, and a place at the table, both at the boardroom and at the family dinner table. But we have to resist the urge to choose to do everything. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And making a choice not to do something right now doesn't mean you can't choose to do it again later. Different stages in our lives call for different priority decisions. What are you investing time in now that will yield dividends for you later? And what are you spending time on that will yield virtually no benefit for you ever? I invite you to consider these things and how you might take a few small steps to rebalance your life, to refocus on what matters most and let the other things go. So instead of being so filled with things to do, you can instead be fulfilled. That's what today's all about. I didn't learn this the easy way, but I'm really thankful I did learn it. If you wonder why this matters, I want you to consider one word: legacy. What is your legacy? What do you want people to say about you once you've moved on from this job, from this stage of life, or even from this world? Do you want them to describe you as frazzled, exhausted, stressed, busy, overloaded? Or might you wish that they would say something like, she was a real difference maker. She made our company or our world better. She really showed she cared about me. And if that's what you're aiming for, how might you show up today in a way that will help move you toward creating that legacy? That is what rebalancing is all about, and that is why we're here today. So now I'd like to introduce our moderator for the panel discussion, Allison Hablinski. She's the Vice President of Marketing here at NOV. She's also a mother of two, and she's balancing all the time in her variety of roles, just like we see up on the slide. All right, Allison, take it away.
Thank you. Wow, you described my morning and my day. So I'm very excited for this. I think a lot of us in this room will take so many things away from this discussion. So first, we're going to have a conversation with our authors. So Carol and Bethany, would you come up? Perfect. So there's 2 mics there if you want to.
Yeah, I've got one on, I think so.
All right, Carol, we'll start with you. Let's talk first about how the two of you came together for this project. Carol, how did you decide that it was time for a book and that you needed Bethany's help?
Well, I was on a vacation with my lovely husband in Italy, and I'd been thinking about a book for about 15 years, and I said, I think it might be time, but I had no idea how to do it. But I do have this best friend from childhood who has already written 16 books before mine. And so when we got back from our vacation, I said, hey, Bethany, how would you like to write a book with me? And I've got to say, I think I'd still be on chapter 1 if I didn't have Bethany. So it just came together really perfectly, and she guided me through how to get it from an idea to where we are today. So
nice. Okay, so Bethany, this one's for you. How has your long history as friends and colleagues at one point helped to make this book come together so nicely?
Well, I was thinking about this. I don't know if this is on. Hang on. I'm also naturally loud. That's what my children tell me. Okay, we're going to try this and see. I was thinking about that question, and my passion professionally is to help people tell their stories. I love people who have a story, but they don't know how to tell it, and to get it out into a book. But most of the people I do that with are strangers when we meet for the first time. So there's a real learning curve of, I got to get to know you, and then I'm going to, in many cases, be speaking and writing in your voice, so I have to figure out your voice. And none of that was on the table because I already knew Carol so well. I knew her story. I'd walked through it with her. I even kind of understood how she thinks. And so I feel like it was such a delight to work together and to be able to just, skip over all that and get to know you and just go, all right, you know all about this right now. And so now we can come together to put it in a story in a way that is going to inspire other people. So it was a lot of fun. I highly recommend doing a project with your oldest friend.
So Carol, as you recorded your own stories for the book, I know that you found that it was impossible to separate your professional peaks and valleys from your personal situation. So raising children, divorce, your cancer treatment. I believe that one extraordinary aspect of the book is its refusal to compartmentalize professional life and personal life. Do you feel that readers need a textured understanding of what that really means?
Well, the answer is yes. I think it's really important to look at the whole person. We all don't leave personal lives behind when we show up at work, and we don't leave work when we go home to our families. And it's that whole tapestry of everything we have going on that makes us who we are. And I think showing up and being real with all that is important. And so much of what I was going through in my personal life impacted what I was doing in my professional life. I mean, the entire reason I left my corporate job when I did was that I had just had my first child, and I knew I needed more flexibility It just wasn't going to work in a 2-career household to be working full-time and traveling and things like that. So much of who we are comes from the personal side of things, and we bring that to work, and I think it's important to reflect that whole story. I don't think my story would have been complete without sharing all the ups and downs and ins and outs personally. So.
And it's impossible almost now to turn work off, that it's in our hand all the time, so now more than ever, yeah. So Bethany, from the beginning of this process, you knew that you wanted to bring in the voices of women who had faced these types of challenges before. Why was it important to open up the narrative in that way to other women?
Well, Carol has experienced a whole range of things in the business world, more than most people I know, but she hasn't experienced everything, and she's not every type of personality. And so it was so fun to say, okay, we want to open this up. We want to interview people. Carol created a survey that we sent out. We ended up interviewing about 70 women and a handful of men, because we do have a chapter that we always kept calling the Men Tell All throughout the whole process. I was like, oh no, that's The Bachelor. But, anyway, they did get a chance to speak just for a tiny little bit of time at the end. But it was such a delight to say, okay, we know that there are all kinds of women who face all types of challenges and come to the workplace bringing their own experiences or their own personalities or their own struggles. But just to see it borne out in the fact that we interviewed this big sample, and I feel like so many different, we created these archetypes, and we'll talk about that, but so many of the archetypes were represented in this 70, it wasn't like they were all the same or they shared all the same type of things. It was such a wide range. So that's why we did it. We did interviews. Carol did most of those that were more in-depth and more extensive, and then also did these surveys and asked people to share, and they did. They shared with a lot of other women that we didn't know. So just to see that unfold, and I think people's eagerness to respond and to share their experience for us was evidence that this book was needed in the world.
Carol, was there a point in the interviewing when you realized that you had something special in this book?
Yeah, I think the more that we talked to people, the more we realized people had a lot of stories to tell. People had experienced a lot of things that might be unique, but yet they fit certain themes. And I think it was at a point where people kept saying, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one who had this happen to me. And then they would realize that it wasn't that uncommon and that it had happened to other people, or just those life experiences we have where we feel like we're on an island sometimes and we're the only one that's trying to juggle everything or handle something really big. And then we realize that we're not alone. And I think it's important that we share those stories. And so I think as those light bulb moments happened in our interviews, and people just kind of organically started to say, I believe in this message. I want to help you do this. And so they started having me interview people. I was meeting people I had never met, and some really exciting, cool things happened to me personally through all of that, because it helped me solidify my career path. Somebody I didn't even know helped me solidify my career path as a result of interviewing for this book. So there were some pretty amazing experiences like that.
One of the questions we asked was something along the lines of, what do you wish you'd known when you were a younger woman in the workplace and navigating? And I was so struck by the women's generosity in wanting to give that advice to kind of their younger selves, or in some cases, they're probably doing that for younger women that they work with even now. And I think both of us, Carol and I, both have young daughters in their mid-20s who are out in the workplace trying to figure it out for the first time. And so a passion of ours was that the younger women could, from these older women's stories, say, all right, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to make some different decisions and not face the pitfalls that these older women are telling me that they dealt with. And so that was something that I think drove us. And I felt like there was a real generosity of spirit in just sharing that advice. And I learned so much from those women.
Bethany, can you tell us a little bit more about the structure of the book?
So we talked about mixing the workplace stories and the personal, and that comes into play in the way the book is arranged. So Carol and I created 7 archetypes that are designed to kind of summarize or at least help you categorize yourself in the workplace. You're not probably just going to be one. You might go, I'm an overloaded Olivia a lot of the time, but I also tend sometimes to be an invisible Isabella or one of those. But you'll see as you're reading the book that these are things that we really saw our respondents, they echoed over and over. So we kind of knew these were out there, and then it was really borne out and confirmed in the interviews. So we have these more prescriptive chapters that highlight each of the archetypes, describe who they are, describe the traps that they can fall into in the workplace, and then some techniques or tips to help you show up better if you are one of these types. And then interspersed with the archetype chapters are the chapters called My Story, which is Carol's story. So you get to kind of keep following her story through the workplace and the personal joys and struggles, along with kind of starting to understand yourself a little better and the things that you might be dealing with as you try to rebalance, and how these women who've gone before you can help you do that.
Anything else about the book that you guys want to share before we move on to the panelists?
I think I'm just excited to share the panelists because they were people who interviewed for the book. So when we decided to do this book launch, I thought it would be neat for some of the people who we interviewed to come up and share a little bit about their experiences. So you could kind of put faces to the fake names in the book. So we did change all the names of the people in the book, and that was quite something to keep up with all the pseudonyms.
I kept making up pseudonyms and then realizing we had a real person with that name.
Yeah.
And then we had to remake up the pseudonym. And then we have archetypes anyway.
Yeah. So, and it's just, it just goes back and forth between the archetype chapters and then the personal stories. And, I'm kind of an open book, so I shared a lot about my journey. And some people might ask, well, why did you share so much about having eye surgery or having breast cancer? But I felt like, back to that, you're not alone. If I can help one woman who's ever going to face breast cancer to not feel so alone, then I will have done a good service, because there are a whole lot of decisions you make very quickly when you're diagnosed with something like that. And Eric could tell you, like, we sat in the room with the surgeon at MD Anderson for a good hour just asking questions about every aspect of the procedure and the treatment and every possible question you can imagine. And there's a lot you just don't know, and you've got to make decisions fast because it's cancer and you want to get it out. So I did go into some detail about that stuff, and I hope it helps people to just understand. And maybe I would hope that it won't be you that has to face that trial, but if you have a friend who does or a loved one, then maybe you'll just be a little more prepared to be there and be present for them. So I realized we have some slides. I need to be able to advance that. So if you want to tell them about the panelists while they come up,
I'll read the bios for Renee and Colleen. So Renee Bacon is the first panelist, and she serves as the Senior Vice President of Sales and Operations and Chief Merchandising Officer. She's responsible for all of Murphy USA's sales and operation functions, including store operations, asset protection, compliance, field readiness, and the store support call center. She also leads all merchandising functions for the Murphy USA and Quick Check brands. Murphy USA markets fuel products and convenience store merchandise across more than 1,700 locations in 27 states with over $23 billion in annual revenue. Beginning her Murphy USA career in 2016 as Vice President of the Midwest region, she was promoted to Senior Vice President of Sales and Operations in 2019 and expanded her role in 2022 to add Chief Merchandising Officer. In 2021, she was recognized with the Top Women in Convenience Award. Renee has a proven track record of success and possesses a broad business background in retail, food, and convenience stores with a unique functional expertise in law, supported by a JD from University of Tennessee College of Law to complement her MBA from the University of Houston and her BBA from the University of Texas at Austin. So, welcome.
I added on the slide the very last sentence. Renee and Carol have been friends since college, and we're colleagues at Exxon. So Renee and I are sorority sisters, and she's one of the main reasons I got my job at Exxon. So really excited to come full circle and have Renee here. All right, Colleen.
All right, Colleen Murphy-Smith is Vice President of Fuel Sales and Marketing for Motiva Enterprises. In this role, she oversees sales and operations for all branded and unbranded fuel sales across Motiva's geographic region, which includes approximately 5,000 Shell and 76 retail fuel stations stretching from Texas across the Southwest and Mid-Atlantic U.S. Colleen has more than 3 decades of retail strategy, joint ventures, fuel sales and marketing, and base oils experience working at both Shell Oil and Motiva. While at Motiva, she's held a variety of leadership roles, including marketing general manager, base oils director, and vice president of product sales. Colleen has served on the board of directors for 2 fuels joint ventures, TriStar in Nashville, Tennessee, and First Coast Energy in Jacksonville, Florida. She also serves as a founding member of Impact 100 Houston and a board member of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Houston. Colleen is a proud graduate of Texas Tech University. And she and her husband of 22 years, Mark, enjoy traveling, experiencing Houston's ever-changing restaurant scene, and spending time with family and friends. So, welcome, guys.
I was waiting for you to do the guns up, Allison.
I know,
being
I
a fellow Texas Techer. They can't all be having a start like the Longhorns.
Exactly.
Go, hook 'em horns. Oh, we've got Aggies in the room. And then the last sentence on here: Colleen and Carol have been friends since kindergarten. So yes, we go way back. More than we probably want to share. So thank you for being here, both of you. And I'll just move back over to my spots while we
don't have any kid pictures, do we?
I have a lot of pictures. I chose not to bring them out. I was afraid you'd want to get back at me, and I didn't want to do that to you.
There's something that happened. Debbie said something happened.
I was just blanking it out so that is it not working with the... This is what happens when I'm in charge of technology. Okay, let's just go back to the book. How about that? Okay. Is that...
I can't see the panelists.
Oh, do we need to share the camera?
No.
Did you see Carol?
If you unshare and then we can.
It's very small. We can probably try to feature the panel.
Make that feature. Spotlight.
Is it working?
I can see it. Can you see it, Debbie? I can see it.
How are we doing? This is Debbie. She's been my right hand for technology for the last 8 or 9 years, and I'm very thankful to have Debbie here today helping. So, is it working for the people online? Maybe they can put a message in and tell us. But.
No, it's not.
Okay. Well.
Brittany had it on her phone and it looked.
Yeah, remove me from the gallery.
Okay, so maybe to remove me from the gallery.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
They said it's working?
they said yes, I can maximize the video.
Okay, maximize the video if you need to. Wonderful.
So fend for yourself.
We're with you online. Sorry, just a little technology challenged. Okay.
All right, we'll jump in. We'll start. This first one is for you, Colleen. So the Rebalancing Act is predicated on the impossibility of having it all and the need for working women to recalibrate their lives with the understanding that they do have limits. Can you think of a time when you had to acknowledge those limits?
Yeah, so my limits are, I'm not going to go to what's in my personal life, but it's more of what's in my mind. And my limitations, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this one, was I'm not capable of doing X. And as my bio said, I've been with Shell. I was with Shell for 10 years. And I'm not even going to go into the fact of what Motiva or who Motiva is, because that's a long story. But anyways, I was with Shell Oil, and I was getting opportunities handed to me from my male managers to do something completely out of my comfort zone. And I did that whole self-doubt in my head that, like, no way on earth could I do that job, because I am, in that book, I've identified myself with almost a lot of the people in the book, but they're just like, I love what I'm doing, I'm excelling in it, I'm getting accolades, I'm loving this job. Why would I want to try something completely different? So I had the self-doubt in my head and put limitations on myself, like there was no way on earth I'm going to take a complete departure into the unknown. And fortunately, I had, again, male managers that pushed me to be out of my comfort zone. And I really acknowledge when I look back, my 2 biggest pivots in my career were when I took that leap of faith, and I did let my own limitations hold me back. And I tell colleagues, younger colleagues in my company right now, like, do not wait 22 years of your career to not take those risks. Take them early in your career. 22 years is way too long. to take that first step out. So I think for myself, my own limitations were self-imposed on myself and not really understanding that I am capable for so much more. So I would share that was my one reflection.
And I would just add to that we found research that women are notorious for doing that. That when we are looking for a promotion or a new job, we look to see if we meet 80% or 90% or 100% of the criteria, whereas men a lot of times are more likely to take those risks and say, hey, I may only have 50% of the job criteria, but I know I can learn that. And so do we get in our own way sometimes, perhaps, because we're so conscientious? And by the way, women's brains are wired differently than men's. I probably didn't have to tell you that. But we tend to look at things a little differently, and so we want to make sure that if we're going to put our job application in, that we are fully qualified for that. But as Colleen said, you can have some of your greatest learning moments when you get out of that comfort zone.
Renee, the first archetype Carol explores in the book is one that her respondents identified with the most consistently. It was overloaded Olivia. As the book says, overloaded Olivia falls deeper into the trap of overcommitment because of a professional culture in this country that glorifies the superwoman image. The notion that a successful woman keeps every ball in the air deftly and does all things well. Why do you believe working women are carrying such heavy burdens?
Well, first, I'm not a role model in this, and it took me a long time to push back. But I do think that some of the things about women is that we have to push back on societal norms and also stop apologizing for it. I did not do a good job early in my kind of professional and personal life on setting expectations for others around me, or Carol, as you say, saying no. Right? I wanted to take it all. I wanted to be the best at work. I wanted to be the best mother. I wanted to be the best friend. And I really had to start saying to others, here's what not only I need from you, but here's what our relationship needs here, right? It would be telling my husband, no, this is what we're going to do for the family. You know, we have to do this. I can't take it on alone. Or I had to, people joke, but I had to train my children on some different things about working time, or had to share responsibilities. I couldn't be at every single event. I'd always be at the important ones, right? But I didn't need to apologize for that. And I would also say that you've really got to have honest conversations with your boss. There were times, like I remember when I had 2 young elementary school kids, and I got a new job, of which was a real stretch, right? And you're all nervous and thinking, can I do this? And we had this report that was due every Saturday by noon. And the data didn't come out until 5:30 a.m. on Saturday mornings, right? There were 6 of us that were doing this job. All others, the 5 others were men with either adult children or stay-at-home wives. I was very different, right? And I had to ask my boss after a while because it was causing a lot of problems. Like I was missing things, I was getting angry and resentful, and I had to say, okay, when do you need this report? I know we've done this for the last 10 years like this, but when do you need this? Well, come to find out, he was like, well, if I have it Sunday by noon, I'll be fine because I'm just trying to prep for a Monday meeting. So I was able to negotiate an extra 24 hours. Now, that meant I spent many a wild Saturday night doing this report or a Sunday morning, but I had to set those limits, and you have to push back. And I think don't apologize for them. I'm also trying now, you mentioned I have a younger daughter who's 24 and kind of starting out, and I'm talking to her a lot about setting limits or who she's going to choose in a partner and what to expect so that maybe she doesn't have some of the same challenges that I did during probably my first decade out there.
How were you able to let go of maybe some of that guilt that you couldn't be at everything, couldn't do everything? Like any tools that you can share that was a nice way to just let that go?
Well, one, I think as women and mothers, I think we're kind of predisposed sometimes to the guilt. So one, I think in some ways though, I had to give myself grace, right? And I also had to explain to those people in my life and to my children, this is what I do. And I told them, like, I shouldn't have to apologize for being intellectually curious or doing kind of this job, and that this job also provided all these wonderful things in their life, from whether their home, their school, the vacations, all these pieces, and that just in life is a series of trade-offs. And so I would tell you that I'm a very active, I have a motto called show up, work hard, be kind, Carol, and you talk about showing up. And I am all in. When I am there, I am all in. And I think that was the piece with some of the guilt, is that I had to realize, like, when I'm there, you got me. But there are times also I had to depend on other people, whether it was grandparents or their father. There were other people that also could be there for them, not just me.
Yeah, sharing the load. Yeah. Okay, Renee, a perfectionist or perfect page, as we know her in the Rebalancing Act, might seem like the type of employee that you would want on your team at first glance. But extreme perfectionism tends to harm women and the teams that they're a part of. Can you share a time that you experienced failure in your job?
Oh, sure. I've stepped in it quite a bit during my career. But one of the things that actually I think helped change the trajectory of my career, and luckily it happened pretty early in my career, is that it was my first kind of region manager job. And I have to admit, I think I was probably a little full of myself. And, my results were great. I thought the stores looked great. The team was great. And I got a new boss, and I thought, the accolades are going to start coming in. And she went out and toured with me for a few days. And her feedback was not that. That basically she said, yes, there's all these great things that you're producing, but I can tell you that you're not connecting with your people. And it seems to be very much all about you and your agenda and your objectives and your tasks and what you need. And she really challenged me that I needed to start thinking about and connecting with others. And she's the one that, Carol, you mentioned it about what do you stand for? And that was one of her challenges to me early in my career, was like, what do you stand for? What do you want your legacy to be? And that is where I actually came up with kind of my motto here, it was in my late 20s, of show up, work hard, be kind. And I wanted this to be what people would remember me for, not only just professionally, but personally. I wanted to be the kind of person that you could count on, and that if I showed up, I was all in. I wanted to be remembered by my children, by my family, by my work associates, that I was a hard worker, that I didn't expect others to do things that I myself wouldn't do. And then finally, I wanted people to remember me as kind. And not kind, I think kind can sometimes be misconstrued for weakness. No, like kind in the sense that I show people that I care deeply, which is sometimes really hard because you have to be very vulnerable and put yourself out there. But I care so deeply that I can challenge directly and have really authentic relationships with people. So from this kind of early career, really kind of slap in the face, figuratively, I think she changed my trajectory of my career and then the way that I interact with people.
Colleen, women like Invisible Isabella, another archetype, tends to fade into the background since they often avoid sharing with teammates and managers. Whether it's a lack of confidence, a shield of armor guarding them based on past hurts, or something else entirely, it's important to find ways to engage them. In your role as a leader, how have you sought out to draw out the Invisible Isabellas?
So I reflected back on one of those roles I took that was a complete departure from my comfort zone of being in fuels. I took a job as director of base oils, and this is when I fought. Because I didn't know even what base oils was. But what I found when I went into that group, and it was a small team, and it was all men, and there was one female. The female on my team was my technology manager, PhD in chemistry, incredibly smart, but she was one of a two-person team, and the other teammate was a male who was senior. And when I saw her, very knowledgeable, articulate, crazy smart. I mean, personally and professionally, but she didn't have a voice. And so it was advantage that I was a new person to this group, and I really got to observe the team dynamics and who contributed in what way. And when I saw her, and I'm like, you have so much to add. I'm not technical. I have a marketing background, so you speak a whole different language, and I'm going to lean on you to help me guide the way of this business. But I said, we need to figure out how to find your voice. And so some of it is just the recognition, observing, recognizing, but then this key part, what I wanted to do, and I actually had lunch with her yesterday, so I told her I was going to talk about her, empowering. So what I asked her to do is, are you good with stepping out of maybe what was not her comfort zone? Because you get her one-on-one with somebody, she just go at it. Leah, one of my friends here, knows exactly what I'm talking about. One-on-one, she's fantastic. But in a group setting, she was definitely more reserved and quiet and took a seat back. And I'll just share, watching her blossom into maturity and sharing her knowledge with a greater team. And this is a woman, too, who had to fly to Saudi Arabia and meet Saudi culture and really work with all men, Saudi men, different culture, how to learn that. And how do you influence? And I love where she is right now. And she told me that I gave her wings. And just hearing that as a manager just meant the world to me. But it's truly like sitting back as a leader, observing the team dynamics, observing the individuals, and then figuring out who is that person and how do you help bring them along. And I'll just use the word again, empowering them and giving them the chance to really step out and do something and be okay with failing too, right? But I knew she was not going to fail. So that was my invisible Isabella. So she still has her wings. Yeah.
Renee Carroll's personal life journey, which she details in the book, has transformed when she stopped focusing on what others expect of her and pivoted to the work and relationships that truly fulfill her. She's been able to reinvent herself in a sense and find a second act marked by freedom and joy. Can you tell a story of your own that reflects the wisdom you've gained after striving for status or position that led you to orchestrate your own rebalancing act?
It's very interesting, knowing Carol as I have for 30 years, right? I mean, we've had some very similar parallel experiences. And so I've reinvented myself now a few times, especially when it comes to career. I had the same experience with Carol, is that when I had my first child, I was working for a major, corporation. I traveled 50% of the time, and it just was not working for me or my family. And so I left, and I started a small business, and grew that small business. So I still worked, but I had much more flexibility, and I was able to be home every night. But then it's kind of the side note, but one of my best friends says I was preparing for my divorce before I even knew it. When the children got a little older, I knew I wanted to get back into corporate America. And I remember I was like on a treadmill and I was reading this Newsweek article, and basically it was like doomsday. It was all about women that have great educations, had these great jobs, and then when they go and they spend time with their family, like trying to get back in the game was not encouraging. You were going to start out at the bottom. You'd probably make 50% of what you made before. And I just decided I refused. I was like, I am so much of a better leader now that after having this small business and being a mother, that this is just ridiculous. And so when my youngest went into kindergarten, that's when I went to law school. And so I went to law school and then came out of law school, practiced law, and then realized I really did, I think my calling is running a business. And so after about 4 years of practicing law, I went back into kind of the corporate, kind of more business world of operations. So, but my advice is to everybody is like, life is just a series of choices and trade-offs. And it's like, if you're not, satisfied with what you're doing or where you're at, like really dig deep and figure out what are some options, and then be brave enough and bet on yourself. Like bet on yourself and go for it.
What was the one thing you said, the advice you give your kids? Somebody's always going to...
Oh yeah, there's always going to be somebody that doubts you, right? Don't let it be yourself.
I love that. We do that. Mine? You don't think it's on? Okay, I may need some mic help, but I want to just shout out to my sisters for a moment. I have my sisters and my sister-in-law here. My brother can't be here because He's also in the energy industry and preparing for the big Gas Tech conference next week. So, but he's represented by my sister-in-law, who's like a sister to me for 37 years or so. I don't know if I have a microphone on, so. But I wanted to just shout out, and I'm sorry if I embarrass you, Susie, but my sister stayed at home with her kids, and then she's a chemical engineer, worked in the energy industry her whole career, just about. But she stayed at home with her 2 boys, and then she was able to go back and have a wonderful on-ramp to go back to the workforce. And I just consider her a great example of what you can do when you have a solid reputation and you are known as a team player and someone who does great work. You can bet on yourself, and you can have a great career. And Susie, how long have you been back at SMB? 17 and a half years. So she's raised her kids, come back into the corporate world. And then my sister Melanie is on the virtual meeting. And I always love to tell the story about Melanie because she has 4 kids. And for a while, she was with big banks forever. And for a while, she was part-time. She worked, I think, 25 hours a week. And she was one of the top 5 salespeople. Called up on the stage with Jamie Dimon, if that gives you a clue which bank it is. But she was called up to get one of the top salespeople awards, and she worked 25 hours a week. And let's just say she was the only one up there that was part-time. But it showed what you could do when you're motivated, when you have good relationships. She was in a sales role, in treasury sales, and I always considered my sisters role models like that. And so you don't necessarily have to look at the path that others have taken these days. You can make your own path, and your path may be unconventional. But it was really cool when we were interviewing people to just see how many different paths people can take. And I love Renee's story. She's about the most educated friend I have with her law degree and MBA and everything else. But, you know, she bet on herself, and she's had an amazing career. And Julie, she was the one who provided all the ice cream to our DI boys in Knoxville, Tennessee, years ago. Tying personal and professional in. I was a destination imagination coach years ago, and our boys made it to Global, and it was in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I said, if you win, I'll buy you all the marble slab ice cream you can stand. And I had to deliver, but I knew who could deliver because they had those marble slab franchises. So it's funny when things come full circle. So hope I didn't embarrass you, Susie. What?
Keep it up. It just struck me to share this because I don't know who all is either in person or watching online and where everyone's coming from with kind of their work life kind of scenario. But I have been self-employed for about 27 years. And so I've managed all of it. No one's ever been managing my time. I've had to manage it myself, whether it was work, family, every aspect of it. What I do each hour is completely up to me, which sounds maybe great if you work a 9-to-5 job. But then sometimes I look at people who go into an office and think, well, that would be nice to really fully be there, because I'm always, if I see the laundry and I have a deadline, then I have to decide if I'm going to fold the laundry or do the deadline. And so that's a challenge, and it's been a balancing act constantly. But earlier, Allison, you asked about guilt. And I think one of the things I just wanted to share is that communication is so key, like with my husband, where I might, when our kids were at school age, and I might have spent the whole day doing school stuff because I could. I can go to their school program, or I can go to a practice or a game. But then I didn't get my work done, and I had to do that at night. And I would feel guilty because I was doing it at night. But just to communicate and to say, you do have the 9-to-5 time to get your work done. Mine is like, kind of catch can throughout the day. And so I have to spend 2 hours. But instead of feeling bad about it, to say, this is a situation. I don't want that to be every night, but to be able to say, I'm making these decisions on a daily basis, hopefully for the good of our family. And then to say, right now, this is time I have to carve out for the work that I have. So I just wanted to speak to anybody else who has that kind of schedule, that it's a different kind of challenge, and it's both a joy and sometimes a headache to try to figure out how to spend your time.
The grass is always greener, right? It's like, oh,
I've always heard, and if you think the grass is greener on the other side, fertilize your grass.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit earlier, but Colleen, Carol made a point of interviewing some men for her book to learn how they have sought to support women in their organizations and how they have seen women fall into traps that keep them from thriving. As one of her male respondents said, men need to be comfortable getting into the weeds of what your women colleagues are going through, he said. You won't have all the answers, but be comfortable with listening, with understanding that you're not going to get it, but you can still listen and support. Have you encountered male managers or employees who are especially sensitive to their female employees?
Yeah, I'll say this has been quite a journey. So 30 plus years, and I'll call out. I'm actually, can I tell them what my fake name was? Well, there's a
You
story.
can tell 'em.
There's a story in there. So I share, and I'll reflect back to when Carol asked, when she sent out the interview questions. For me, it was quite. I tell you what, I had to reflect back and think about my 30 plus years with my companies, the 2 companies I worked for, and wow, it was really soul searching because I'll have drinks or lunch with friends or colleagues, and I'll share some stories, but really just to put it all on paper. I think, Carol, I finally called you. I'm like, I can't write all this down.
That was hilarious. I'm reading this really long answer to the interview. It's a short novel.
Yes,
and then
sorry.
it says, I think I'm going to have to call you to finish this.
And we did. Because when I reflected back my early days with Shell Oil, and so the story in the book was that out of college, got my first job with Shell Oil. I was in sales, calling on gas stations, and a senior female pulled me aside. She said, our general manager prefers his females to wear skirts. And I went, what? I'm in Houston, Texas in the summertime. I don't really want to put on hose and heels of a skirt, right?
To go
I
to
want
a
to wear
gas station.
pants. So I was wearing pants. I was wearing and to be told that, and this was in 93, 94, that to me, when I reflected back on that story, I thought how that mindset was then. Like somebody could actually tell me to wear skirt, not pants. And then I think about my male colleagues now, my managers now, and I think about the evolution that both men and female have had working together. Eye-opening. And I was quite positive in my reflection back on men. So I will say, when I think of the male colleagues I work with and the managers that I have, they're fathers of daughters in the workplace. They're husbands of spouses who are in the workplace. That didn't happen, when I first started. That was very rare when I first started in oil and gas. So I think the evolution of men knowing that they're more compassionate, they understand it, they live it, has really opened the awareness and the sympathy, empathy of what females are having to balance. I just reflect back on that. And there was a story I shared just the other day with them that last year Motiva sponsored some tables at the Texas Women's Conference in Austin. And we went and we brought men and females. And one of our senior leaders at the refinery in Port Arthur came over and I said, well, how'd you like this? Because it did get kind of dicey. Elizabeth Banks started going off kind of in a she's talking about abortion and things like that and claiming her political views. And I said, that's not why I'm here, but all right. And I asked one of the guys afterwards, I said, what did you think? He goes, I've never experienced anything like this. And now when I go back to Port Arthur, I need to open up the dialogue now with my female colleagues and my female team members. So I do feel like companies have evolved in opening up dialogue with men and including them. Like when you have women's affinity groups, it shouldn't be just females. It should be very diverse, so many different matters, and give men a chance to come in and listen to the dialogue. So I have witnessed more of that openness, willingness to learn and understand more.
Yeah, I feel like when I leave a women's type conference, I wish my husband was there to hear all the things, because it definitely goes both ways. Anything else to add from the men's perspective in the book?
Actually, I was just going to say, I mentioned earlier that women and men think differently, and there's some research behind this. But men tend to think compartmentally, like their thoughts are in boxes. So when they're in the work box, they're working, and they're totally focused on work. Women have brains that are like a mind map, if you're familiar with mind mapping, and you're constantly firing on all cylinders. And one of my doctors, in the stories in the book, but he was just saying, you ought to interview my wife. She's also a surgeon. They're both surgeons for MD Anderson. I don't want to out him, but it was just interesting because he said, when I'm in clinic, and I'm seeing patients, and that's all I'm focused on. And yesterday, my wife was also in clinic, and he said, we have clinic on the same days. And he said, I was so shocked because right in the middle of all her patients, she sent me a text, and it was something like, don't forget to pick up the cleats for Junior on the way home because he has baseball tryouts tonight. And he said, I couldn't figure out how she could be thinking about that in between all her patients. And I was thinking about my own balancing act all these years, thinking, okay, when this meeting's over, I need to go. I need to be thinking about who's picking up the kids, what they're doing for carpools, what we're having for dinner. So your mind is firing on all cylinders. One person I interviewed said they think the reason men can be more compartmentalized is because they have great women behind them doing the other stuff. And it's probably vice versa, too. They're able to focus better. I think it was really important to get the men's perspective because I don't want to minimize the fact that men are in the same conundrum right now that we are in terms of this always-on technology at our fingertips. People can interrupt you anytime, day or night. Men have these challenges, too, most certainly. I spoke to women because I am a woman, and I could relate to the woman's side of things. But I don't want to negate that there's a lot going on both sides right now. So, anything you want to add? You good? Okay.
Anything else, guys, before we open up to questions? Are we at the question
I think we're
portion?
right on time for the questions. So
Anyone in the room?
I know Debbie's trying to get some questions from the online folks, but people in the room, what questions can we answer for you? Anybody up here? Or just thoughts? Anything resonate? Amanda? Hi. Let me bring you a microphone.
I think I can. I have
Project.
a loud voice too, like that.
Okay.
So, thank you, panelists. It was fantastic to hear your insight, and I too wish my husband was here to hear because we just had that conversation this morning about the balance that I'm having to make every day. But my question to you is, how do you balance at home when you are either both full-time or you're part-time and full-time? Do you feel that the burden is still on the woman when you're in the workforce and you're managing a family?
Ooh, who wants to take that one? I think a lot of it depends on who your partner is. I happen to be married to the greatest man on earth, and he's in this room right now. So that's my second time around. And he's so supportive that, he'll ask, how can I help you? What do you need? Now, there's some things he can't help me with, just like there are some things in his business I can't help him with. But I think that makes all the difference, having a supportive partner and being able to have that communication. And maybe some of you who are still coordinating with younger children can probably answer more to how it's like today. I mean, I don't have the kids at home, so it's not as difficult. And I'm here to tell you, to give you some hope and inspiration if you do feel like, they always say that the days are long and the years are short when you have young children, and it is so true. So for those of you that are in my kid wants to play 8 sports and be in scouts and do this extra thing at school and do that and do everything, and you're trying to balance it all, I feel you. I've been there, but it does get better. So, Allison, maybe you have something to add
I
to
like
that.
the idea of setting the expectation around letting your partner know, hey, I'm going to be working from 5 to 7, and just, over communicating. I personally don't do a great job of communicate. I feel like I talk all day at work, and I'm talking to my kids and with my husband. Like I'm like, he gets it, right? But he doesn't, and that's not fair to him. So I think setting those boundaries and expectations around what your schedule is and what you need is important.
Any other thoughts on that one?
I just tell my children, choose your spouse wisely.
Yes, Jane.
I've been retired 12 years now. I was in the oil and gas industry also. And I just wanted to thank you for recognizing the women who have gone before us, the trailblazers. They sacrificed so much. I actually worked with women during my career who had to resign when they had their children and reapply for the same job. And if they had more than one child, they did it each time, and they were happy to have their job back. But then in 1979, Jimmy Carter passed the Pregnancy and Disability Act, which made it easier for women to leave and, stay home with their child 6 to 8 weeks, and then come back to their job that they had when they left. I feel like we have made such strides, and we continue to make strides. And I am just so happy to hear all of you women talking about your wonderful careers and how you are, through your book, Carol, inspiring women and our daughters to just continue to have that balance between work, family, and all those things that they want to do in their lives.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, I'll get the mic back. Another question. Come on. Yes, over here.
This is a little bit in the same vein as what Jane just said, but I think I was raised with a mother who reminded me to have perspective a lot. And, hey Liz, it could always be worse, right? So be really grateful for what you have. And so what are your thoughts on kind of how, is that almost like a toxic thing to constantly think? Because I think it's also helped me a lot where I say, yeah, this is really tough and I kind of want to have a lot of pity for myself, but I also am super blessed. So it's in a lot of ways it saves me over and over again. But does it also sometimes make me say, you know what, I should just be content because I have a great family and I have a great job and I have a great boss, which he's up there, and all those things. So what's your take on that? I think I think about it often
So then you just take more on.
Right,
Yeah.
because I should be really lucky to even have the things I have and the opportunities I have. So.
I think there's a difference in keeping perspective and feeling guilty. I think it's important to have perspective and realize this too shall pass. I always tell my children, this too shall pass. And I'll ask them to think about 3 questions. What's the best that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? What's likely to happen? So that they have a perspective on this trouble of the moment. But just because it could be worse doesn't mean that it's ideal. And it may not be working for you. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword to a degree, because I think that's also a recipe for guilt to set in. I'm so lucky I have these opportunities, therefore I should take advantage of all of them. And I was, everything I talked to you about with those questions about feeling like you should do something because it's expected or because you ought to. That was me. I was always saying, well, I should do more with the PTO. I should do more with, church, whatever it was. And then I'd be overloaded. And that was a recipe for burnout. It was also, when you have too much to do, you can't do any of it well. So I think the flip side of that might be, what do I really want to excel at and do really well? And what do I need to say no to in order for me to be able to open up space for what matters? So maybe that's just a little subtle different way of looking at it.
I think you also have to look at it on, am I being used for my skills, and is this helping me, or is also someone taking advantage of me? Mm-hmm. And I do think that there's a time, because you're talking about kind of perspective or guilt, and I should just always be grateful. Well, yes. Practicing the art of gratitude, I think, is extremely healthy, right? But if there's injustice, or if there's a wrong, or if there's something that also needs changed, I think that you have to use your voice, right? And you have to figure out how to do it, right, in a proactive way. But I think there's just different times, and I'm sure, we've grown up in this, right, where you had to use your voice a little bit and challenge and kind of push back and say, yeah, I am grateful for this job, but I'm not grateful for what you just said to me or how you just treated me. And let's talk about that.
We do have a question from the chat. Can you scroll so I can see the very beginning?
Debbie, do you want to share it? Bring you a mic.
I can read most of it.
So we have a question from Michelle, and she says, what would the panel say to younger working moms who are beginning to hear comments like, Mom, you are always working, from their children? And for those panelists with older children, what do they say now about Mom having worked while they grow up?
You want to try it?
That really struck me, so I was going to talk really quickly. And because my kids are 3 are in their 20s, my youngest is 19, and I do think that I'm so grateful that they got to see me as a whole person the whole time they were growing up, which is someone who was leaning in to use the gifts that I believe I've been given professionally and as a writer. And all, again, there were always balance issues, or quite often were. So I didn't do it perfectly, but they saw me hopefully care about them, but also make choices for myself and my career. And so that I didn't just not do this thing that I believe I've been called to do. My kids now that they're working adults, a couple of them, two are still in school. They are doing some things in some ways that are similar to the career that I found. So I've been able to help them as an example, like this is what this looks like to work in journalism or to work in sports and some of these areas. So that I've directly been able to help them and influence them. But also I would say that they've been empowered by seeing that. And I don't know, I haven't heard any complaints about the fact that I spent time working when they were young. Instead, I do think it's enriched them and given them a path to follow.
I would also say, I had to listen to my children because I could be, very involved in my work. And I remember times I had an opportunity to pick up the kids from school and I'd be on a conference call. And there they get in the car and they're wanting to talk to me, right, and share their day. And here I am. And there was always, though, a communication to where, my daughter explained, it really hurts my feelings, when you do this. And so I would have to do, again, trade-offs, right? If I had the opportunity or the luxury of being able to pick them up from school that day, then I should figure out how, and I had a lot of flexibility, so I was very lucky, right? But then how do I make sure that I give them that 15 minutes or 30 minutes? I also learned and it's not ideal, but I learned how to turn it off and turn it on. I mean, I am toggle central. I can work, then do something personal. And so with my children, especially as they got older, when they wanted to spend time with me, I would put down the work and I would spend time with them because you know what? In an hour or two, they're going to ignore me. And then that's when I could work. And sometimes it may not have been ideal for me, right? But I kind of recognized that there's almost these seasons in life. And so that this season will pass. So while I had them, they were a gift. So I just learned too to kind of toggle it on and toggle it off.
And it's funny, I was featured in a podcast today, and it was kind of funny because the very first thing I say in the podcast, the introduction of the podcast, it's on the Big Talk podcast if you want to listen. But I say, I wonder if people would say, I think 10 years ago, people would have said, she was really nice, but she was really busy. She got a ton done. I don't know how she did it all, but she was really stressed. That's how people would have described me. And then this is not how I want to be described. But I also talk about my kids. And I would say to those who are still going through this with the kids saying, Mom, why do you work? Why, you work all the time or whatever. Just know that it gets better. Because now that my kids are out in the work world, they're saying, Mom, all that stuff that you told us, we're starting to see helps us in our jobs. And they knew a lot about what I did too, because I had my own company for a long time. But I think that they can learn lessons from that. And I think it can help. But I think Renee's right that you've got to prioritize and know when to just drop everything and try to avoid those situations where you're going to be setting yourself up for failure, like picking them up from school and having a conference call. Can't always help it. But you got to work on that.
I'll just add a different perspective. So I don't have children. But when I look at folks that I've worked with, folks that have worked for me, understanding their family dynamics and what they need is really important. So that's a good way that I could have related, is to say, what do you need? What's going to help with some balance? So if you have young kids and they're in sports, you're dual income, you've got, two are juggling jobs at the same time, you've got a kid in school, how can I as a manager help you find that time that you need? So if that means, and listen, since COVID, work from home is a thing where it wasn't a thing beforehand, but we always allowed flexibility. If you need to leave early because of one reason or another, me as a manager, I needed to be open to that and letting them have that balance. And I also I've got stories too where I was told by a younger worker that I didn't understand because I didn't have kids. I'm like, well, that's not fair. Yes, I don't live your life. I don't live a day in your life with a balance of kids, but let me understand the complications and what you need to help your work-life balance. And even how do you want to progress in the company? So I would just say from my perspective is just being open to listening and to asking, and also just knowing your coworkers. I mean, just knowing who they are, knowing their kids' names. I mean, that seems really simple and basic, but asking that. So yes, we spend a lot of time with our colleagues at work, but how much do you know them on their personal side? And to me, that's what made a big difference, is knowing their spouses, knowing their family, knowing their goods and their bads, and just letting them, giving them the opportunity to talk to you. So that was just another reflection I had of how you can help balance some of that.
That's great. Debbie, I think we have one more question about I saw Gen X and Gen Z, and that's always a hot topic, but
Here we go. So
yeah.
the question is, how do millennial and Gen Z women deal with the fact that Gen X, with the emphasis on the work ethic and office space time, are still largely in control and do not necessarily want to hear about work-life balance or remote work?
Okay, so first of all, yeah.
All these Gen Xers right
We are all Gen X, and I just realized they're talking about us like baby boomers, like the old people. So we had an interesting discussion about this at dinner last night. The four of us went to dinner, and I'm a big fan of Mark Efron. Some of you know who Mark Efron is, Lori, some of you in the room. Mark Efron is a thought leader in talent management, and he talks about what you want out of your career, but what do you want to sacrifice to get there? Because if you really want to be high potential, there are trade-offs. You need to work extra hours. You need to think about what kind of sacrifices you want to make. And so the way it came up last night was that, there's work from home that works. I had employees that were great working from home. I did not worry for a moment about the productivity of them from home versus at the office. And so I was able to have a really flexible arrangement with them about working remotely. And that's great, but we need to be able to have those honest conversations. So when you have someone who is, putting in a lot of effort for 2 hours a day and not working any more than that from home, then they probably haven't earned the right to have a lot of flexibility. I mean, ultimately, we all have the expectation, and it's a reasonable expectation, to expect our employees to be productive. So if they are not putting forth the effort, then they probably are going to be expected to show up and have face time more. I do think there's a real opportunity for some differentiation here. If I can say to an employee, you always go the extra mile, you always do more than what's needed, get it done early, and take on even more, and I would like to honor that with some extra flexibility for you. I mean, we all think everything has to be exactly the same. And when it comes to fairness and legal things, yes, it does. But when it comes to helping get the best out of each employee, you really do need to be able to customize that. And if we could have more honest conversations when people aren't being productive, we'd probably prevent a lot of the issues that come up with the hurt feelings and stuff. But I think we've got a lot of conflicting information out there now about work from home. But I think it comes down to how productive are you at home, and can you still get the same results?
Well, I do also think, because always the work-life balance, comes up. And I always just tell people too, if you're looking at work-life balance, like even in a day, a week, even a month, sometimes even a year, you're going to always be disappointed. I think you have to look at things in kind of these longer time periods. And I would say that, you have 3 Gen X here who all really made very bold decisions for themselves in their careers and to prioritize family or other issues at times. And so I think we need to sometimes have frank discussions that life is a series of trade-offs, and life is a series of sacrifices to get what you want. And I think seasons, and you have to decide what is right for you, but you can't depend on others also to make that happen.
Okay, I think we are to the end. There's a Gen X on the chat saying, we're Gen X here and we're supporting millennials and Gen Z to live their biggest dreams. That's right. That's right. Okay, I'm going to leave the microphone here and go back up, and we'll close things up. I'm going to try to take it back over to PowerPoint, so we're going to see if it works to share my screen here. All right. So we kind of skipped over Allison's pretty picture on here and Bethany's website and things like that. But now, you may wonder what we mean when we say, let's create a thunderclap. It's actually a thing. I learned that. It is when you amplify a message on social media to try to get the word out. And so if you like what you've heard here today, this is going to sound really strange. You probably don't get asked to do this in business meetings a lot. But we have a QR code up here. This is my contact QR code. And if you're willing to spend 99 cents right now, I would love for you to scan that QR code and go buy an ebook on Amazon because it'll help us get bestseller status. And as of the time we started this meeting, we are the number one new release in women in business or business, health, and stress. Some of the categories, we are number one today. And with Amazon, it changes all the time. So, but we're trying to get a thunderclap out there today and get some excitement about the book. Let people know about it, and that's why we've priced the ebook at 99 cents. It's normally $9.99, so it is 90% off today. So we would love for you to buy the book if you are so inclined. That would really help us, and we appreciate that. So we are trying to create a thunderclap in many ways, and I have been amazed at how important social media can be in something like this. As a brand new author, let's just say I'm learning things for the first time a lot. Thankfully, Bethany has guided me along, but getting the word out about a book is the biggest part of this, and social media is huge for that. So you all should have received books in the room if you're here live. If you want to take a picture with the book, post it on social media. If you want to just reshare our post on social media with your networks, we would love that. I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide. We have the QR code out back and stuff too if you want to look at that later. But we have some examples of how you can share on social media to make it easy. You can review and rate the book on Amazon, Goodreads, any of those sites. You can post a picture of you with the book. That is our publisher, Tricia Brooke, holding the book. Big Talk Press is our publisher, and she's the leader of that. And so she posted a picture on social media this morning, and we would love it if you'd use the hashtag the Rebalancing Act. You can tag and follow me. We will be giving updates. We will be giving you resources to help you on this journey, and would love to have you be part of our community. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I think I'm on TikTok. My stepdaughter, the amazing Alyssa Enneking, who is a pro volleyball player in Milan, Italy, by the way, is also a volleyball player by day and my social media director by night. So she is an influencer and she knows TikTok, so I'm just happy to know her. So she is helping us with social media. Shout out to Alyssa. Feel free to buy the books. You know, it's Christmas season coming soon, and they might make good gifts for your friends and family and colleagues. And if you are so inclined to ask anybody else to buy the 99-cent ebook, please feel free to do that. We appreciate all your support. But again, I want to take this back to Houston Energy and Climate Week. Thinking about the energy and the climate around us, but also within us, is so key. And I really hope that you've gotten a few ideas and just a few thought-provoking statements in your head to start thinking about what legacy you're leaving, what matters the most to you, and how you can sustain your energy and the climate around you for what matters most. That's the goal here. That's what we're hoping to inspire through all of this. And so I just want to thank our panelists, our moderator, of course, my lovely author friend and co-writer of this book, Bethany. Thank you all for sharing your insights. Thank you to the people who helped today, Marielle and Debbie and all the folks that are helping get things organized here. And thanks to NOV and David Reed, Brittany, your amazing executive assistant. Allison, thank you for your hospitality here, having us to host this event. Thank you, Houston Energy and Climate Week, for making us part of this much bigger thing. It was very, very exciting to be part of the first one. And thanks to all of you for being here, being part of it, and helping us celebrate our Rebalancing Act, but also inspiring you on your own rebalancing act. And now we will officially close the meeting, but please do hang out, visit, have some snacks, take some pictures, enjoy just hanging out. And if you want to get your book signed, I'll be in the back to do that. Thank you so much.